Thank you all very much. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. Alliance for Life holds a special place in my heart, just for the movement that they recognize, the support they've given me. I have always been very staunchly pro-life. I believe strongly in the sanctity of life. I make no apologies for that. I make no excuses for that. And I think that's important. My first session, I co-authored and voted for and supported the heartbeat bill. That was back before it was safe to do that. But I think that's important. And fortunately, we gained the ground and we passed it overwhelmingly the next session, along with the trigger bill that my friend Gio Capriglione authored. And fortunately, I think we've got a pretty clear, clean, pro-life comfort zone this session. There are a number of bills that have been filed trying to attack, trying to get the abortion back in, trying to attack the heartbeat bill, trying to attack the trigger bill. I don't think any of them are going to see the light of day. They haven't so far. We're down to the end. I'm glad to be out of the Capitol for a few minutes anyway. I've got to go back for the rest of the calendar. Today we have a very active calendar, and then 2 meetings. I serve on appropriations. I'm pleased to say we put considerable more funding into alternatives to abortion. I think we've approved an additional $40 million. There's an additional $60 million out there. I think we're going to get there. So I think we're going to see $200 million into that program. You know, one of my concerns and kind of complaints, that program's been there, but I felt like we didn't market it well enough. It was kind of a well-kept secret. So that's been brought to light, and I think we're going to see much more aggressive approach to it. I'm really pleased to see the video, Dr. Skog, that has been very helpful. One of my frustrations has been I've had countless conversations with physicians that complain, oh, you've messed up on the bill, it's vague, we can't do anything, you've put us in a bad spot. I wholeheartedly disagree, and I think Dr. Skog is right on point, 100%, that the physicians can't use that as an excuse, and I think that's all they're using it for, is an excuse, and they're causing more harm, certainly to the life of the mother. It just makes no sense for them to say, well, we have to wait till the problem gets worse. And your health is affected before I can do anything. That just shocks my conscience. And I know that a number of physicians are not following that, which I wholeheartedly support, and I hope videos like this are going to help do that and convince the medical profession that they're out of line here. Let me partially, just to get it off my chest, let me follow up on Joe's comments about Proposition A. I live in San Antonio. San Antonio, unfortunately, has a number of suburbs. I live in one of those suburbs. I think we have 16 or 17 different suburban areas in Bexar County. None of us can vote in this Proposition A. So it's vitally important that we get everyone out that can vote to vote no against Proposition A. It's unbelievable what they're proposing. You know, they've packaged it into one proposition that I think is clearly inappropriate, and I think the Supreme Court has kind of tipped their hands, I hope, that if it does pass, they're going to knock it down. But why they didn't do it early on is disappointing, as Joe said, because if nothing else, the amount of money that's being spent. I know the Police Officer Association. I've been very, very close with law enforcement for a long time. Work very closely with San Antonio Police Officer Association. They have spent right at $1 million fighting it, because, you know, part of it affects them clearly, down to the point there's 2 provisions that if you steal something, going to climb up to $750 value, all you're going to do is get a ticket. If you provide some graffiti, up to $2,500 worth of damage, all you're going to do is get a ticket. Think what that's going to do to small business. Think what it's going to do to big business. What's going to happen, what they're going to have to do to counter that should that pass. They're obviously focusing their campaign, and I think why they combined it around the abortion issue. One of the propositions is to decriminalize abortion. And I think that's where they're trying to get the momentum just on that and the vote for everything else. And we can't let that happen. I guess about a month ago, the city manager and the chief financial officer, one of the council members, came to the Capitol about a different issue that they wanted some help on. And so I took the occasion to ask him, the city manager, I said, what were you thinking? What were you thinking to do something like this? And they kind of embarrassedly said, well, they know that it's not enforceable, but they're going forward with it anyway. Because that's part of the overall plan. I'm convinced, and I think there's support for it, that this isn't driven just in San Antonio. It's a nationwide initiative. And like Joe said, we can't let it pass in any location because it's just going to be like a cancer and grow. And we cut it out. And that's why we cut that cancer out by defeating it. So I'm doing everything I can to say, although I can't vote for it, to encourage my constituents that are within the city limits, friends and family, to do all they can to get everyone out to the polls to vote. It's occurring during Fiesta Week. Fiesta is a big deal in San Antonio. If you haven't done that, the whole city kind of shuts down for 2 weeks, and we're right in the middle of it. And I think there was a legitimate concern expressed that that's going to affect the turnout. People are so focused on Fiesta and having a good time and all rather than something so serious. So I'd encourage you, if you have friends and families in San Antonio, get them out there to vote and vote no as quickly as possible. What I thought I might do is just discuss a few things that are happening in the legislature. And then I'd be happy to answer any questions, take any suggestions or help that you might be able to offer. We're kind of at the crazy stage right now. Things are, I haven't been real comfortable with this session. It just hasn't had a good feel to it, progress-wise and every other wise. We're down to really kind of the last 2 weeks, this week and next week. If bills don't get through the process, they're not going to. I sit on appropriations, also on public education, select committee on youth, health, and safety, and also the local and consent calendar committee that I have to go back for this afternoon. So it's been busy. Public education has been one of my passions. I served on the school board for 12 years and served 3 terms as president. Fought school finance before I was on the board and when I was on the board and still continue to fight school finance. So that's an important area to me. We've spent a lot of time. School safety, teacher compensation, teacher benefits, curriculum overhaul, accountability overhaul. It's all moving slowly. I saw it in appropriations, for example, that we recognized from the start all the work we did on putting the numbers through, getting the budget done, really isn't going to make any difference because it's all going to be decided at conference committee. The conference committee is going on now. And I'm afraid that's what it's going to be like with the education bills. We've got them all kind of postured. Still a lot of work left to be done in these 2 weeks, but again, then it'll go to conference. We on the House side are not exactly in sync with the Senate side, so that's where the conference is going to be so important, particularly in the education area. I think we've done a lot of work on the House side, and I think that's kind of been the tradition through the years. The Senate, not so much. And where they have done some things that just totally opposite of what we're doing on the House side. Conference is going to work that out hopefully, or we're going to be back in July for a special session, which I think is looking pretty likely anyway. On the education issues, we have disagreements going over school choice and voucher programs. I don't think we're going to see a result there during the session, and likely have a special session, at least one special session over that. Property taxes, very, very important, at least in my district. The border, property taxes, and education were the big three issues. And property taxes, I think, is affecting everyone. We all have got our appraisals again, so I think everybody's blood pressure's up even higher again. So that's going to have to be dealt with. And again, the Senate proposal is to do a homestead exemption, increase the homestead exemption. Lieutenant Governor Patrick's convinced that's the panacea, that's the way to go. On the House side, we have a totally different approach where there's going to be tax compression, a cap on appraisals that he really doesn't like. So that again, that's going to be an interesting conference if we can get there on that, because I think there's a recognition we just have to do something about property taxes, and in a meaningful way. You know, we've done little band-aids ever since I've been there, the last 3 sessions, but we need something that's meaningful, and we haven't done that yet. And I'm of a mind, I really don't think the homestead exemption increase is going to be that meaningful long term. You know, it may, if you have a lower valued home, maybe so. But the appraisals keep going up. And as long as the appraisals keep going up, the rate doesn't have to be affected. It takes care of itself. So until we do something meaningful in that regard, we're not going to be helping ourselves, in my view. Along with school safety, mental health has become very, very important. I've done a lot of work on that the last 2 sessions, really. You can see it increasing. It's become to the crisis point now. And we were concerned about it through the pandemic, what it was doing to our children. Child suicide rate is going up alarmingly. But it's moved out of that vein, and a lot of it from the pandemic. So we've learned a lot on the bad side from the pandemic. It's moved into first responders that I think is really an alarming point. We knew that there was data to support that veterans, there was a high suicide rate. Retired first responders, there was a high suicide rate, but now it's moved down into the active ranks. Largely due to the pandemic, the stress that put on first responders, both having to work in isolation was one factor because of the restrictions of the pandemic. And then also just the resulting stress, anxiety, and loss of businesses, family, that's added, additional stress. So I think that's going to get a lot of focus, and deservedly so, mental health in the broad sense. Certainly at our schools, we have to put more counseling and identify mental health problems growing in our children at the earliest stage. The earlier we can provide some intervention and identification and get some treatment or address it in another way, the better. We've done, just this last week, we passed a bill in the House that's been called the SCOPE Act that is going to provide more parental controls and access to what their children are looking at on the internet. You know, social media has been great, I guess, but boy, there's a lot of problems that have come with it. And the arrogance, you know, we brought them, the select committee, I was appointed the select committee on youth health and safety at the end of the 3rd special session, last session, to look into things like this that were affecting the safety of our children. We requested the social media companies to appear. They just blew us off. They sent a kind of an industry consultant that was caught giving the exact same word-for-word presentation that he had given 2 or 3 sessions previously. We finally put some pressure on, and we got a couple of them that came this session try to say all the right things, but words are one thing, actions are something else. So that's why we had to pass the bill we did this last week, and hopefully the Senate's going to leave it alone and pass it too. I think it's important that we allow our parents to be involved in what our children are looking at on the internet. There's some bad stuff on there. Which brings me to, we also passed what's called the Reader Act, House Bill 900. That's over in the Senate now. That involves what we're seeing in our libraries, and particularly in the school libraries. I have to tell you, we had a long hearing, well into the early morning, because there's a lot of opposition to it. I appreciate the First Amendment. I respect and have high regard for our Constitution. I think we all do. But there's some stuff that's unbelievable. They passed out the different materials that are being found in our different school libraries and public libraries, but particularly the focus on the school libraries. And I got to tell you, I was embarrassed to even look at some of it after a point. And I know it's not statewide, and that's the position they try to take, that it's so limited, it's really not happening. Well, it is happening, and we saw the evidence of it, and it's disgusting. And I think anybody would agree to that, even some of more liberal, let me say, colleagues on the committee recognized how bad some of it was. So we're addressing that. I'm sure it's going to result in some litigation, but I think it's important. We have controls in place already, a good committee structure. I know the school district I came out of where I served. I think we had a good community involvement and the community gauge, the community standards that should control. We had a good process within the district, and then also community involvement. That exists still. And they'll try to argue with turning it all around and telling the schools what materials they can have and what they can't have. That's not it at all. But it does put some onus on the publishers and the vendors to rate their materials. And there's pretty severe sanctions back on them if they try to play games and rate something lower than it really should be, like some of the junk that was presented at the committee. But I think that's an important progression, an important position that we're taking, moving our society forward. I think it's important for the well-being of our children and the development. And I think you'd all appreciate that we're taking that course. It's been controversial. There's been a lot of opposition, a lot of name calling. You get very bitter, but I think that's where we need to go. This next week, we're going to hear on a business courts bill. I was called to the governor's office yesterday. Had a conversation with him. It's very important to him. It's also important to the Texas economy and to Texas. We've done so well. The Texas Miracle is what has attracted businesses, good businesses to Texas. It's been such an important economic driver. And we need to keep that going. That's why we are who we are. That's why so many people are coming here, and business in particular. But because of the status of Texas litigation, it's reached the point where it's a detraction, and it's causing businesses to think twice whether they really want to come into that kind of environment where you can't get any respect for business cases. I know in Bear County, where I come from, it's impossible to get a business case to trial, partially because the family law cases have just taken over the docket, but also because of the concern over the quality of the judiciary and concern about where business cases can go. So the business courts case is going to provide for the establishment of a specialized business court. Here's only business matters. No personal injury, attempt to try to appease and satisfy the trial lawyers. No personal injury cases. Those are not going to be affected. They'll stay where they are. But pure business disputes, securities violations on up that aren't getting the attention now. And that's why business is starting to take a second look where they want to come here. But what's so important is that make sure that the judges hearing those cases are experienced in those areas, rather than just a pure elected, no telling what you're going to get. I know it's been a disaster in Bear County. It's been a disaster in Harris County. It's been a disaster in Dallas County. The quality has gone down so badly, because anybody can file for be a judge whether they have any experience whatsoever or not, and it's showing and it's impacting. So this is set up. It'll be on a regional basis through the administrative courts initially. I'd expressed to the governor, my hope had always been that we could have specialized business courts in the local districts, just like we have designated family law courts, we have designated probate courts. Why not designated business courts? Other states have it. You know, Delaware, a lot of cases are filed in Delaware just because for that exact reason. They have a chancery court that deals just with business matters. So that's going to be up next week. It requires appointments by the governor, and then sets up also specialized appellate courts to hear these matters. Again, very pro-business that I think is important. I talked about the property tax. We have the Senate has passed a gender. Modification. I'll use that. It's coarser than that, and it's much more harmful than that. We haven't acted on it yet in the House. I'm hoping that at least we'll act on the Senate bill. I think there's a lot of support for that. I think it's important. The thought of a young child being mutilated, the word I started using, mutilate, and there's no way around it. That's what it is. And for a child to be confronted with that at a young age makes absolutely no sense to me. So I'm confident we're going to pass that in the House when it comes over, either our own bill or the one coming from the Senate. And I think that's, again, the continuation of the direction we need to be taking for the betterment of our society, certainly for the betterment of our children. We're also moving forward aggressively on broadband. You know, broadband is a critical need, whether from an educational standpoint, whether from a healthcare standpoint, just a communication standpoint. You know, we've become so dependent upon the internet and broadband capabilities that we need to expand it. In the underserved areas, Deep South Texas, the poor areas without any access, we saw it really impact during the pandemic because it becomes so essential to telehealth, telemedicine. You can't access telehealth or telemedicine if you don't have broadband capabilities. We found the students when some of the districts essentially closed down and depended on hotspots if they could do it. Some had to use their buses and try to set up a hotspot where you had to get to that hotspot, and so many people couldn't or didn't have the capabilities to use to make access or utilization of those hotspots. So broadband is going to be expensive, but I think it's an important venture for us to continue, and there'll be a lot of emphasis there. We passed the main bill just this last week. I'll be happy to stop there. I ramble sometimes too much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, take any suggestions, thoughts that y'all might have.
Hi, I wanted a little clarification on the San Antonio Proposition A. I must have missed it, but I didn't understand what the pro-death portion of that was, what they're proposing. If you could clarify.
Which the what?
The pro-death, the anti-pro-life portion of Prop A that we're so opposed to. I'd like to know what that actually is.
They're essentially decriminalizing abortion. So they're going to, under this, abortion would be appropriate within the city of San Antonio limits. They can't, but and they know that. That's what's so frustrating about it. They know that that's unenforceable, and we're going to come in immediately and block it. But it takes time, it takes money, and I think, like I said, I think this is more of a national initiative, and this is just step one. And if they can get it in a place like San Antonio, they'll move around the country. The meeting I mentioned when I had with the city manager said as much, that they understand it's going to be cropping up in other cities. So that's why we have to stop it. I mean, it's everything they're trying to do violates state law that should be preempted, but we're going to have to take the step two to do that.
This is kind of more of a pro-life question. For the people that are being brought across, many of the women are being brought across are pregnant, and these children are just disappearing. And, is there any effort into kind of identifying that, where these kids are going, and how, like, making that, addressing those issues, I guess?
We're obligated, the U.S. Supreme Court says we have to educate all immigrants, legal or illegal, and then the children, we have to care for them too. That's part of the problem. I didn't get into the border because we probably don't have enough time or days to talk about that, but that's one of the problems. There's so many unaccompanied minors that are coming across the border at an unbelievably young age, totally unaccompanied. And some of them will have a note pinned to their chest saying, call so-and-so in Detroit or Dallas or wherever. We're obligated to deal with that and understandably so. I think those children need a life too, and protection. And that's why I don't want to get off onto it, but we've just got to do something to get the federal government to step up to their obligations on immigration and protecting the border. I think the governor, I support what he's doing, but it's costing us dearly, and we're not making a dent in the problem. Yeah.
One more. You said one more question. This is not a question, Representative. It is a thank you. As a constituent of District 121, thank you for serving. Thank you for standing here this afternoon and saying you're unapologetically pro-life. For legislators to stand with a public, with a mic on and saying that means so much. Thank you for taking all the questions from our group. It's a crazy busy day for you. We all know that, but your presence here this afternoon is greatly appreciated, and we will be praying for you and the rest of the legislature during the weeks ahead. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kurt.
Thank you, Representative Allison.
Thank you all very much.